It's been brought to my attention, and I'm not going to tell you by whom, that you're more interested, and I'm going to pause and think about this. No, I'm going to say it. You've got this ridiculous notion that you're more interested in a heavyweight clash between Fury and Joyce than you are between Fury and Usyk, and I think that's bloody ridiculous, Spencer. Welcome to this week's edition of Talk Boxing, a slightly different one with Simon Jordan located in Doha for the FIFA World Cup and Spencer Oliver in the dizzy heights of Hertfordshire, where hurricanes hardly ever happen, apparently. Spence, how are you?
Simon, how are we, mate?
We're good.
How is it out there?
I am in a desert. But notwithstanding that, I'm not going to be in a desert with you. I'm going to be in a wonderful place of information and imbuing people with our knowledge. Listen, Spence, moving into the show, Dillian Whyte, where he is, what he's doing, what we think the landscape for Dillian is. He's fighting on Saturday, Spence, at Wembley Arena, fighting against an opponent that comes in with an inauspicious record in terms of he hasn't got any defeats, he's unbeaten, but notwithstanding that, he hasn't really thought anyone in any of his notes. What's your take on it?
Well, listen, I hadn't really heard of Jermaine Franklin, although he comes with a record of 21-0 with 14 KOs, which is pretty impressive. I had a little look at him on YouTube, and what do I make of him? I think he's tailor-made for Dillian Whyte. If I'm totally honest, he's small, he's a little bit overweight, he's flat-footed. Dillian won't have to go and look for him. As we know, Dillian's heavy-handed, he's got a good right hand, even better left hook. And I think Jermaine Franklin will make Dillian Whyte look very good on Saturday night, if I'm totally honest. I think Dillian gets the KO.
When we look at Dillian, obviously you and I had, I think, the misfortune to some extent to go and watch that fight with Fury, because despite all the passage of time that Dillian had to wait for his shot for a variety of reasons, some perhaps of his own making, when he perhaps looked at step-asides rather than making and taking fights. I was very disappointed by the fight. It's very easy for me to say because I don't have to climb through the ropes, but notwithstanding that, we have an evaluative view. I think it was about levels, and what we saw from Dillian is that he was literally nowhere near the level of Tyson Fury. This fight, in some respects, because going back a second, when I saw the press conference, I think I said to you and to Jim Whyte, who's with us, that Dillian, with all the histrionics in the background about not wanting to be part of all the pressers, not wanting to get involved with the ticket sales, and playing, to some extent, the victim card, because he was very much the B side of the conversation, both financially and billing-wise. When I saw him eventually come in, I think on the Thursday before the fights at Wembley Stadium, I said to you, I don't think he believes he can win. I don't think he believed he could win when he came into the event on the Saturday night. Now, you're going to tell me something different in a minute, which is, as a fighter, they always believe they can win. Yeah. But when you look at Dillian with that defeat, that kind of chastening defeat, off the back of avenging the defeat against Povetkin, which you all say, well, that can happen. He got caught with a peach of a punch because he wasn't paying attention or had let his guard down for a moment. But where is Dillian now? Where's his journey to? I mean, this is being billed potentially as a fight, as a gateway into Anthony Joshua, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think Dillian's been damaged by that defeat? Do you think these fights now for Dillian are not about winning perhaps world titles, they're about getting paid? Or do you think Dillian is capable of putting aside, again, I use the word chastening defeat that he had against Tyson Fury, putting this guy on his backside and then doing some damage with Anthony Joshua if they make that fight?
Look, I think, going back to that fight with Tyson Fury, I think that you hit on some valid points there. I think that he was defeated before he got in the ring, because that does happen to a fighter. I think that he recognised, once reality kicked in, now we've got to remember, Dillian waited for over 3 years for that world title shot. He eventually got it against Tyson Fury, Wembley Stadium, the best settings you could possibly be at. You think, right, I'm going to roll the dice, I'm going to go for it here. but it was a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights in the build-up to that fight. I think Fury got inside his head, psychologically beat him before he'd got in there, and you got it, and we saw that as the first bell went. He come out, he was a little bit tentative. He was, boring.
Were you surprised by that, Spence? Because I mean,
I was very surprised.
You thought he'd put up a good fight, and I think most of us thought he'd put up a good fight. But he didn't, did he? Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, definitely, Simon. I think that I was expecting a lot more. I thought Dillian would have rolled the dice, but that's not taking nothing away from Tyson Fury. Was it just a case of levels, like you said, and Tyson Fury actually being that good and not allowing Dillian to do what he wanted to do? He wanted to get inside, he wanted to land them big shots, but Fury boxed a perfect fight. He controlled the distance, and when he saw that he was actually getting to Dillian and taking him down, he picked the shot and boom, landed that uppercut. Now, Dillian Whyte, in the 3 fights that he's lost, has been sparked with a right uppercut every single time. Povetkin, if you remember, that right uppercut through the middle. Anthony Joshua, round 7. When he had Anthony Joshua in all sorts of trouble in the second round, Joshua landed the uppercut to end the fight. And Tyson Fury, the identical shot. The reason being, Dillian Whyte throws that right hand, steps round, becomes square, and the elite fighters read that. And that's basically what happened. Do I think Dillian's still an elite fighter? Yes, I do. Do I think he can mix with the likes of Tyson, Fury? No.
What do you mean? What do you mean by elite, Spence? Because
when I say elite, Simon, what I'm saying is in the top He's in the top 10 of the world. Right. Yeah, the top 10 of the division. So yeah, I think he's still there. But is he damaged goods? I think that's a massive point because he could be slightly damaged goods. He's been around a long time, Dillian, and he looked terrible. And you can only judge a person in his last contest. He looked terrible in that last fight. And I'm with you. I think that this guy's been brought over, like this Franklin, to make Dillian look good and set up this fight with Anthony Joshua in March. That's where all roads lead.
What do you expect to see from Dillian? I mean, I know you're saying that this guy's flat-footed and is that and the other, right? But I'm assuming that the guy will come to fights, and I'm assuming he'll think it's an opportunity for him because he's fighting a world-ranked fighter that's just fought for a significant amount of the belts with Tyson Fury and was given a chance in that fight by certain people, I think you included. Yeah. But you look at it and say, what do you expect to see from Dillian? Do you think anything other than an absolute resounding victory starts to tell a story about where Dillian Whyte might be?
Well, I think it's just a good yardstick to tell us exactly what Dillian Whyte's got left at this stage, if I'm totally honest, because Franklin's tailor-made for him. Like I said, he's very flat-footed. He comes for it. He doesn't move anywhere, and that's perfect for Dillian because he is very heavy-handed. So he likes fighters like that, and he's very short as well. Franklin, he's a small guy. So this style is tailor-made for Dillian Whyte to look good. But Franklin is heavy-handed, and you touched on another point there as well. He's 21 unbeaten, and when a fighter's unbeaten, he's coming to win. He sees this as a huge opportunity because he knows. Eddie Hearn's even been vocal about this actually. That he said last week that if Jermaine Franklin wins this fight, it's Jermaine Franklin versus Anthony Joshua in March. So basically, it's whoever wins.
So it's an eliminator to fight Anthony Joshua.
Absolutely, and that's where we're at with it. So look, Franklin's going to give it a go.
So it doesn't really matter then. So what we're saying here, let me just get this straight and see if this is right. Whoever wins this fight fights Anthony Joshua. So if it's a dull fight where neither one of the fighters are particularly inspiring or give us anything that's vaguely compelling, we are then going to suffer a fight with Anthony Joshua on the basis of irrespective. So do you think the fans will buy into that? Because the fans, in principle, would think Whyte versus Joshua, it's a live one. It could be a reenacting of the fight that happened 4 or 5 years ago. That was an interesting fight that people were very invested in because Dillian Whyte put up a compelling performance. I think you and I believe that if he was a bit wiser and maybe a bit physically fitter at that time and able to compete for a certain period of the fight when he's been hit hard, might have got an outcome in that fight. I think we've both talked about him gassing. So in the event that he just manages to negotiate this fight, we're still going to endure it. We're still going to get this fight with Anthony Joshua. Do you think the fans are going to subscribe to this view? Because I think the initial reaction when the sensible move was taken, and I think we both agree it's a sensible move, that making sure that Anthony Joshua gets himself together. All this about Frank Warren and Tyson Fury making this fight and doing Anthony Joshua a favour, I've changed my mind. I think it was very sensible for him not to have taken that fight because I think he was taking it at the worst time. But going to the fans, if Dillian Whyte doesn't come through this, in any great flying colours, do you think there's going to be a big appetite? But do you think the same clamour will be there as potentially there is now, going, oh, I like that, I can see that fight?
Yeah, I think it will, to be honest, because like I say, because I think stylistically he should come through it and look good in doing so. But however he comes through it, I think the history of the two guys, we know that Dillian Whyte beat Anthony Joshua as an amateur. And you know what it's like, Simon? It's like stylistically, he's always going to be, Dillian Whyte is always going to be Anthony Joshua's bogeyman. He's always going to be the guy that causes Joshua problems because of his style. And I think that people would pay that. I think their paths at the moment, Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua, their paths are running parallel on where they're at in their careers. They both need wins to gain a little bit of confidence, and they both need each other to put themselves back in the mix for a world heavyweight title shot. And that's basically where we're at with it. So I think from a business point of view...
Well, we're seeing a very different... I mean, when he fought Dillian Whyte, and of course we're seeing both, I suppose it's the same for both fighters, we're seeing a very different Anthony Joshua. What we wanted to see, or what we need to see, and what Anthony Joshua needs to do, I think, is reclaim the land that he once stood on, which is the ability to go forward and let his hands go and step in, right? And he did that in the first fight against Dillian Whyte. It's going to be very interesting to see if Anthony Joshua can get back in that mindset. But he will have a different mindset for Dillian Whyte because he's beat him, rather than the mindset he had for Usyk, albeit we can't make an excuse for his first fight against Usyk, can we?
No, but listen, with Anthony Joshua's mindset, yes, he did beat him in 2015, but he was bad. Well, I was at ringside
he was
there.
Straight, wasn't he?
He was badly hurt, mate, and it was inexperience that let Dillian down on that. And Dillian had that victory over him as an amateur as well. So what I'm saying is, from a boxer's point of view, Anthony Joshua's going to go in there going, I know this is dangerous territory. I know I can be hurt if he tags me. And you're right in what you said there. You touched on the point that Anthony Joshua has to find that mindset that once took him to the world heavyweight title. He's got to find a little bit of that rawness, you know, that took him to that level. Because if he decides to try and outbox Dillian and box on the back foot, he could be in murky water. That could be a dangerous fight.
If Anthony goes into this fight and doesn't impose himself upon Dillian Whyte and tries to negotiate himself through this fight in the same way he did with Andy Ruiz, the world is going to pour over him and say he's gun shy, he's gone, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%, and that's why I think there's always going to be an appetite for that fight, because there's a lot of outcomes on how that's not a foregone conclusion because of the styles of the guys. And
I know it's a bit previous, Spence, and I know that we haven't seen him dispatch Franklin, and let's assume that he's going to do that. In your mind's eye, can you make a case, a legitimate case, for Dillian Whyte after the showing against Tyson Fury and ultimately the loss to Povetkin, which he avenged, and he looked great when he avenged it in Gibraltar? Mm-hmm. Can you make a case, because I can't, even as damaged as I think Anthony Joshua is, and I don't think Eddie would put him in if he felt there was real jeopardy in the Whyte fight, can you make a case for Dillian beating Anthony Joshua?
Yeah, I can make a case on that, and the case is that, like I say, like I said to you before, that Dillian's like Anthony Joshua's bogeyman, as in stylistically.
Did Dillian Whyte beat Deontay Wilder?
Yeah, huh?
No,
I'm just talking about that fight there, that specific fight that we're talking about there with Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte. I think that I can make a case. Yes, I'm with you.
Right,
I think
let me rephrase it. Do you think he will beat Anthony Joshua?
No, I think Joshua wins the fight.
Okay.
But just to add a little bit onto the end of it, I think he's capable of knocking Joshua out. There you go. And even as damaged as he was in that last fight, I still think he's capable.
But they're all capable right now with Anthony Joshua in the shape he's in. Any of the top 8 heavyweights, top 10 heavyweights are in a position to potentially knock Anthony Joshua out if we don't get Anthony Joshua being vaguely resembling what he was before. What do you think? What do you think the fans think of Dillian now? Because I went through a phase where I thought he was a bit of a moron originally, and then I saw him fight Anthony, and I admired him for his fortitude and for the fact he really went in there, and I watched him develop, and I began to like him more and more and more. I understood some of the ill feeling that he had for the Fury situation, albeit I think he should have grown up and accepted the fact he was the B-side, he was getting 6 or 7 million quid, and stopped being so bloody churlish about it, and get on with it. And I think he should have been involved in the presses and the selling of the event. Not that it would have affected the idea that the event would have been sold out.
Sure.
But what do you think the fans now think of Dillian? Because it was poor. I know we've made this point. I know I'm going over it again, but I'm going over it again to make the point that it was so poor that the fans had gone along with Dillian Whyte. They'd almost felt his pain because he wasn't getting his title shot. People were aggrieved. I was aggrieved. I was thinking, come on, this guy's got to get a shot. But what do you think fans now think of Dillian Whyte? Do you think they've lost their ardour with him?
No, I don't. Totally not. I just think that I think the fans just think what they thought anyway, that Fury's just, you know, proved, he underlined basically that he's the number one in the division. But with Dillian Whyte, I think fans, they haven't lost that respect for him because of the journey that he was on, the 3 years that he had to wait, and in between waiting for that, taking on the likes of Joseph Parker, fights that he didn't need, fights that were very losable, but he was taking on the people like Alexander Povetkin, Joseph Parker. Who else was it he boxed? He had a right ding dong with. You know, there's a few names there that you go, he didn't really need to do that, and I think the fans respected that, and he got his opportunity. And yeah, he did let himself down to an extent, but I know what it's like if you're in with a fighter who's just leagues above you and you can't do anything about it. Then it is what it is, you know. And I think that's what it was there. I think it was just a case of Fury was too good, but Dillian Whyte, I don't think they've lost respect for him. I think he's definitely got another opportunity.
How many fights do you think he's got left in him? Do you see him doing a sort of Derek Chisora, knocking about for quite some time and getting paid for knocking about?
No, I see him maybe another 3 or 4 fights in him, Dillian Whyte, depending on what route he takes and who he boxes. You know, it could be less than that. You know, it's one of those ones. I just think that they're all at the tail end of their career now, really. Totally honest. Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte, Anthony Joshua. We might see him in the ring 3 or 4 times, all of them. But I think they're at the stage now, and that's why we want to make these fights happen. Absolutely. Even Alexander Usyk, he's at that age. You know, he's getting on a bit as well.
Talking about that, it's been brought to my attention, and I'm not going to tell you by whom, that you're more interested. And I'm going to pause and think about this. No, I'm going to say it. You've got this ridiculous notion that you're more interested in a heavyweight clash between Fury and Joyce.
Yeah.
Than you are between Fury and Usyk, and I think that's bloody ridiculous, Spencer.
Yeah, no, listen, we all want the undisputed, but you know what? I can't use the words that I want to use on here, if I'm honest, Simon, but I'm fed up with undisputed controlling, this fight for the undisputed and undisputed. The fights don't happen for whatever reason because politics get in the way.
You've been hanging on about undisputed between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury for yonks. What are you on about?
No, but Anthony, but listen to this. Tyson Fury versus, tell me if I'm wrong on this one, because I will stand corrected if you want to do that, but I'm quite strong on this. Tyson Fury versus Joyce is a much more exciting fight than Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk.
Why?
That would be a spore fest. I think that would be boring. Usyk would try and keep away and keep out of trouble. Fury would be trying to use his reach and stuff. Stylistically, I want to see Joyce versus Fury. I think that's a great fight. After what the Juggernaut done against Joe Parker, another fight that I doubted him in, thought that Parker would have too much experience, I just went, you know what, this kid's ready. Well, he's not a kid, he's 36 years of age. I went, this guy is ready, and he's ready now.
You think Joseph Parker would give Tyson Fury any trouble?
Who, Joe Parker?
Yeah.
Nah.
Right,
nah.
So the fact that Joyce didn't walk through Joseph Parker, but put up a brilliant performance against Joseph Parker and ground it out in the end with sheer fortitude, ability, strength and bravery, doesn't necessarily mean that Joyce versus Tyson Fury is a more compelling fight than Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, surely.
Let me flip it to you. I'm going to flip this one to you. Who do you think does better against Tyson Fury, Joyce or Usyk?
I think there's reasons why both of them could be very compelling in this fight because
I mean, in your heart, in your head, who do you like if you had to put your money on who you think would give the better fight? Who would you say?
Honestly, I think probably Joyce because I just think it's a man with a propensity to stand in the middle of the ring. And come forward against Tyson Fury and do whatever he needs to do and can take the punches that Tyson Fury will throw at him. But I do think there's a natural order. And I think Usyk's come into the heavyweight division and he's come in as a cruiserweight, gone straight into it, dealt with Derek Chisora in a very difficult fight, taken the belts of Anthony Joshua, and I want to see him to some extent because there's this British leaning in me. I want to see one of our guys put him in his place a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to see him put back in his box. Now, And I think because of the nature of the fact it's a heavyweight fight, I think Tyson will want to knock him out.
Yeah.
And I don't think he'll want to allow him to turn it into a bore fest. I think Tyson will believe, in the same way that he beat Deontay Wilder, and Deontay Wilder had inordinate amounts of power, that he can potentially knock Alexander Usyk out.
Well, here then, I'll tell you how I see them two fights, how I pan out. I think Tyson Fury will knock Alexander Usyk out. I think he'll be too big, and he's very clever at using his weight, very clever at wearing the fighters down, and he's got a great boxing IQ, Fury. He's people underestimate that. And I think that Fury stops Usyk, but Joyce gives him trouble. I still think that Fury wins, but I think Joyce gives him a lot of problems.
I think you're right, and I think that when we were talking to Joyce, he was sitting in front of us. I could barely see around him at the Fury Whyte fight. People were saying, the very same thing. This is the guy that will give Tyson Fury some trouble. I want to see, in an ideal world, Joyce have one more fight at a decent level to give him more experience, more awareness of fighting in slightly bigger fights, so that when he's ready. And when the opportunity comes, or some more to the point, when the opportunity comes, there's no overawing of Joyce. There's no disadvantage besides the fact he's never fought for a world championship, and Tyson Fury has fought for the belt several times and held it for a period of time now. I just want the best version of Joyce against Tyson Fury, but I do want the natural order. I do want Usyk dealt with by Tyson, and I want him to go on then and have a fight with Joyce, and then I'll be fully engaged with that fight. Anyway, listen. Heavyweight division, Dillian Whyte, opportunity to start the redemption of his journey. Anthony Joshua waiting in the wings. And we'll see, obviously, Fury and Chisora coming up imminently. Let's move into a different division and a different set of circumstances. One that's been fraught in controversy, or one of the circumstances has been fraught in controversy. Not this fight that we're speculating is about to land, and I think you know that it is, right?
Yeah.
Which is the fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith.
Yes.
I think it's a great fight. I think it's a real fight. I think it's a fight that Ben Shalom has been very keen to make. I think Liam Smith called it out a while ago. I think it's a very challenging fight for Chris Eubank. Notwithstanding, I think Liam Smith looked not the same fighter in his most recent fight. What do you make of it?
Liam Smith is a very good fighter, former world champion, but very good fighter. He didn't look particularly good in his last fight. We both said that, didn't we? He was getting caught a lot, and his opponent just out of nowhere quit when he looked like he was doing very well. But I don't know. This is one of those fights that's so intriguing for so many reasons. Eubank Jr. has looked good in recent times and looks to have slightly improved under the watchful eye of Roy Jones Jr. He looks like in his last couple of fights, he just seems to have turned a corner and looks like he's sort of putting it together a little bit. Liam Smith has had a long, hard career, and timing might be perfect for Junior in this fight. It might be perfect, but
who goes into it in your mind when you say that? I just want to backtrack for a second. When you say that Chris Eubank Jr. has looked better, against Liam Williams?
Yeah. He looked better against Liam Williams. I thought he showed, in them first 4 or 5 rounds against Liam Williams, I thought he showed his boxing was brilliant, his timing was good, he was putting it together. I think there was something that happened that he didn't want to talk about because he was only going to get hammered for it. But you saw about halfway through, he decided to change tactics, box on the back foot, he was moving, wasn't throwing his right hand at all. I don't know what the reasons were behind it, but there was a fight of 2 halves, but I thought there was glimpses of brilliance there from Eubank Jr. I think when he boxed, who was the other guy? Marcus Morrison. Yeah. When he boxed Marcus Morrison, I thought he looked terrible, by the way.
He fell in between 2 styles, didn't he?
Absolutely. I thought he looked terrible. But I thought it was clicking against Liam Williams. I thought he looked a lot better.
Well, they share that opponent, don't they? I mean, Liam Smith fought him twice and dispatched Liam Williams twice, isn't he? So they share this opponent.
Yeah, but I mean, the first one, who won the first one? It was one of them very controversial ones,
yeah.
And I think, the second one, he stopped him. Did he stop him in 9 rounds or something?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, Smith is a tough guy, man. He's a good body puncher.
Who goes into the fight as the favourite, Spence?
Maybe Smith.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think this has the same?
Smith's been at that level, Simon. He's boxed at that level. He's been a world champion. He's been in with the likes of Robert Garcia, Roberto Garcia, Anthony Fowler, Jesse Vargas, Canelo. He's mixed at that level. Yeah. And Eubank's, although he has been at a level as well with George.
Well, of course, he's been in there with George, isn't he? He's been in there with George. He's been in there with Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, I just think that Smith will probably start slight favourite. Not saying that I think Smith's going to win the fight, by the way, because I don't really, at this stage, I'm not sure who wins that fight. I'm really on the fence with this one. More splinters for me.
Why do you think Eubank Jr. has taken this fight? Because we've listened to him for a time now, and he got ridiculed a lot, and I think he was entitled to get ridiculed for the taking of the Liam Williams fight, because we listened to a lot of noise. He obviously calls out Triple G regularly, and he'll be calling him out when he's taking him on a saga trip. He'll be so old, Gennady Golovkin, before he ever gets to fight him. But why do you think Eubank's taken this fight? Because Liam Smith, on paper, is as you say, a part of a legendary fighting family. He comes to fight. You know, he is a former world champion, albeit I think he was slightly degraded in his last fight, and that might just be for a variety of different reasons that we're not privy to. It's a big fight for both of them. Liam Smith wanted it. Liam Smith called it out first, didn't he? Yeah. Liam Smith was the one saying, I'll have that. And I think Ben Shalom tried to make it as quickly as he possibly could.
Yeah.
Why do you think Eubank's taking this fight? And again, going around the houses a little bit, how dangerous do you think it is for him? Because he wants to be a world champion. Liam Smith has been a world champion.
I think it's quite simple why he's taking this fight for me. One, it's a box office fight, and he likes money. That's for one.
Yeah.
But it's the only fight he can have, because I think the winner of this is like an eliminator, really, because all the world titles are tied up. They obviously can't get a world title shot, so that's the next best available opponent. And for both of them, at this stage of their career, Simon, I think for both of them, it just makes sense. Because the winner will box for a world title next. It's a big payday for both of them, because they will go box office with it. They'll put on a strong undercard, and it just makes sense. It's like, I think that for the financial gain, it makes sense, and I think for the winner, it makes sense. And let's have it right. They're both at the stage of their career. A loss spells the end. A loss for these two.
Does it? But does it? I mean, does it spell the end for Eubank Jr. more than, say, if it lost to Conor Benn? I mean, you can look at this fight, and if he lost to Smith, you'd say, well, he lost to George Groves, who went on to be a world champion. Yeah. He lost to Billy Joe Saunders, who was a world champion. He lost to Liam Smith, who was a world champion. But if he got beat by Conor Benn, and obviously we all know what's gone on there, and going up 2 weight classes, and is at the beginning of his career, surely if he loses Liam Smith, he's still got somewhere to go.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, he has. But I just think that the road is so long back, and at this stage of his career, I'm not sure that he'll have the appetite to do that. I just think he's at a stage now where he can only win. He wants that world title shot, so winning is the only option at the moment. You're right, he's in a different situation because he can still continue, he can still go on, he can still follow those world title dreams. If he lost to Conor Benn, of course, that was door shut, mate. That was game over. Like, his career was finished, and that was a huge, huge risk he was taking going into that fight anyway. So no, I'm not saying it's the end for the loser, but let's be honest, let's be honest about this. The loser, where does the loser go in that fight at that stage of their career? That's a long road back, that.
No, I agree. Do you think his stock is, do you think Eubank, ironically, in a fight that I never liked, in a catchweight fight that was all about money, that was all about trading off the legacy of their father's names, ironically, the fella's got his stock at his highest in the eyes of certain people. Do you think his stock is at his highest? Because when he started, obviously, he came through. Everyone felt that he was a very exciting prospect. Then he came up short against Billy Joe. Then he came up short against George Groves. And some of the momentum and some of the interest waned slightly. He's a brilliant publicist, a brilliant speaker in the boxing world. I actually have warmed to him the more I've heard him speak. But there's an irony about the fact that his stock is potentially as high. Do you think it is, or do you think that's just background noise because he's come out of it looking like he's the kind of victim of a whole raft of nonsense that promoters try to push on him, and potentially Conor Benn tried to inflict upon him?
Now listen, you listen to the word on the street, and his stock has rose massively. I think that people have got so much respect for him through what happened there, through what was going to potentially happen in that fight. People could see it. Like, he went from zero to hero, not hero to zero. He isn't
actually. But Spence, let's
I get it, Simon.
He actually isn't entitled to any more particular respect because he was taking a fight with a fighter that was coming up 2 divisions. He was coming down, I know, and of course we're all looking at the pictures of him where he was absolutely, shredded to get to the weight. Yeah. He was only taking it because it was money. He was prepared to let him fight with
Yeah.
alleged drugs in his system, albeit
Yeah.
it's difficult to say it's alleged when you've failed 2 tests, but let's just step on that side of the line. I'm not entirely sure why he comes out with a great deal of increased currency, because whilst he's the victim of a fight that didn't get made, he was only taking it because it was a big bag of money. I'm not sure that's entirely justified. But that's
Listen,
maybe that's the way.
It's the world we live in, Simon. It's the world we live in. You've only got to speak to the people, mate, and listen to, like, people's perception of Chris Eubank Jr. have changed massively. Whether we like it, we don't like it, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, the perception of Eubank Jr. has changed. People now love him. Like, he's become.
I've warmed him. I agree with you. I've warmed him because I saw the presses that he did. I saw the way he engaged. I think he's very smart. He's very articulate. And I get it. I still maintain that we want to see this guy fighting for a world title. Can you see him? Can you see who do you think wins the fight between Smith and Eubank Jr.? And if Eubank were to win it, and you say he does, and we'll ask that question in a second, do you think he'll win a world title?
Right, who wins the fight between Smith and Eubank Jr.? That I really can't give you the answer to right now, because I'm not sure. I'd have to see the build up. I'd have to see what they look like getting up to the fight, because I think they're both at that stage of their careers. That's a real 50-50. I don't know who wins that one right now. If Eubank does come through it, can he win a world title? I tell you, he could win a world title, pending on what happens with the champions. Jamal Charlo, who's the WBC champ, he could be moving up. What I'm saying is an opening might happen.
Well, you've always believed that, though, haven't you? You've always believed that
yeah,
there'll be a manipulation around fighting someone for a vacant belt, don't you?
I do, and I think that might be the way that it sort of unfolds. I really do. Jamal Charlo is very inactive. He hasn't been around for a long time. He's looking for big fights. He was looking for the fight with Triple G. That hasn't happened. Triple G's got, he's 40 plus now.
Yes, that ship has sailed, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think that potentially he could win a world title, definitely, depending on the route that it happened and opportunities do arise. But this is, love or loathe Chris Eubank Jr., you got to respect him for, as you've got to know him a little bit more personally, Simon. Actually, you go through the layers of this guy. He's a nice kid,
Yeah, no, he doesn't talk to me because he doesn't like my opinions.
I thought you got to know him a little bit.
No. He routinely ignores me. He'll when I'm at fights, he'll talk to Jim. He won't talk to me. That's fine. That's fine.
Do you want me to pass on any messages? Because
he'll grow up and realise that people's observations can be. People can criticise, they don't always have to praise. But listen, let's move on and that's a good fight. I'm looking forward to it because I love the Smith family. I think they're a great family of fighters, and they always come to fight. And I was always so sad for Paul Smith that he didn't win that fight against Arthur Abraham. I thought he thoroughly deserved it. So I always look out for the Smiths with the best interest. I want Chris Eubank to get an opportunity to fight, to shut my mouth about the fact that all he does is talk about world titles. So I'll look forward to it. I think it's a proper fight. It's a real fight. But here's one that really interests me, and I know you've got some views on it. I'm a huge fan of Anthony Yarde. I really like him as a fella. I like him as a fighter. I admire the journey that he's gone on and fights he's taken. One a little bit earlier in his career against Kovalov, where he put up a real performance and potentially could have won that fight if he perhaps, like Craig Richards, had believed in himself a little bit more or been a little bit wiser. It was surprising that he lost to Lyndon Arthur and avenged it in such a fashion that you can't ask for anything more. He's had a fight on the weekend. Done the job there, but he's now on the cusp of fighting Beterbiev.
Yeah.
Tell me, because I think you would like this fight as well, don't you?
I love this fight. I love this fight for a number of reasons. Styles make fights, and one thing we can guarantee: someone's getting sparks out. You know that. I know that. That's a guarantee. Out of the 23 victories that Yarde's got, he's got 22 KOs. And Beterbiev's 18-0 with 18 KOs. Someone's getting knocked out, Beterbiev's very smart. He controls the space well. He comes in, he looks at that big right hand, and he can whack. He's a real monster. He is 37 years of age. He is one of these guys that you don't know. Like Yarde's got some momentum around him at the moment. He had that good win against Lyndon Arthur. He had a win on Saturday night, was a low-key one.
And that was a good win against Lyndon Arthur. That second fight
was a great win.
Absolute.
Yeah.
Do or die scenario, because if he lost again to Lyndon Arthur, he was in no man's land. He didn't just win that fight, he destroyed Lyndon Arthur, didn't he?
Destroyed him. And he went in there as the underdog, not just with the bookies, but I think he went in there as the underdog with...
Because the first performance in lockdown was so bad, people thought, what in God's name are we looking at?
And also, what in God's name can he do to change things from the last fight? Like, you know, I thought Lyndon Arthur's got his number, but like you said, Simon, I think he took him out. He beat Lyndon Arthur. He'd done him in 4 rounds, but it was the manner that he'd done it, the way that he conducted himself. He held the ring. He waited for Lyndon Arthur. He counter-punched so well. He's on some real momentum at the moment. We got to remember. Let me tell you about this guy, right? He's got no amateur background, Anthony Yarde. He's got no amateur background at all. He boxed on his Queensbury boxing thing, which is like a white collar boxing thing. Decided, actually, knocked a geezer.
You spent some time with him recently, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I spent some time with him. I went down to his training camp. We spent some time. I've known him back from them. I actually commentated on his fight when he was doing this Queensbury boxing back in the day. And thought, this kid looks like a monster. He's just a natural athlete. Never put on a pair of gloves before. He didn't know really what he was doing there. Yeah. And he thought, I like this. And all of a sudden, he's just gone. So he's been learning on the job. So although he's been around a long time, I think he's still improving massively. I think he's got a great chance against Beterbiev. And I know people are going to think I'm absolutely nuts by saying that, because he's highly regarded as not just a monster of the division, but one of the monsters of the sport, really.
And you regard him that way, don't you?
I do, and no one's given us any other reason not to think that. You know, the way he dismantled Joe Smith Jr. in 2 rounds, and that was a fight. I thought, that's a tough fight, that. But he just controlled it. He, like I say, he's very good at what he does. But so is Anthony Yarde, and Anthony Yarde's full of belief. I spent that time with him in the gym. He's not going to go in there and do a Dillian Whyte. He won't go in there. He'll go in there and he'll take his opportunity. He won't freeze. Yeah. And Beterbiev, when he comes in and he sits in the pocket and he throws those shots, my advice to Lyndon Arthur is, when he throws his shots, go with him. Get him on the counter, because he's quite open when he throws his big, because he puts everything into the shots. I'd say to Lyndon, as soon as he goes, you go.
Anthony, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd say to Anthony, as soon as he goes, you go. That's the way that he beats him. I think that he beats him if he meets him head on.
Does he take anything? Does Anthony? I spoke to Anthony, and he regrets. He looks at the Kovalov fight in a certain way, doesn't he? And he looks back on it and thinks there was an opportunity for me there. Yeah. Does he take a lot from that fight? In fact, he lost. We know, right? And everyone goes, "Oh, it was credible." But you know what? You know what a good fight is, Spence. Not one you put up, one you win, right? So we all say it's a good fight, put up a good fight. But at the end of the day, you look back on it, it's a loss. So does he take a lot from that Kovalov fight?
Yeah, that was something that we went over. That was his sort of coming of age fight. Even though that he lost that fight, he had Kovalev gone in the 8th round. Yeah. He gassed. He put his foot on the gas, and he nearly took him out, run out of steam, and then he got stopped himself in the 11th round. But he took a lot from that fight, because you can't buy that experience, Simon. And I think he gained so much from that. You know, so he'll know when to put his foot on the gas, when not to, when to roll the dice, when to go for it. Like I say, he's going to be an overwhelming favourite against Beterbiev. Even though Beterbiev's coming over into Anthony Yarde's backyard, he's going to be an overwhelming underdog. And
Yarde is
going to be an overwhelming underdog. But what I'm saying is, he's got a real shot. This is a fight that I would have a punt on. I'd have a little cheeky bet on Yarde pulling off a huge shock victory.
When you look at this sort of fight and you think about Anthony Yarde, and you think about the challenge in front of him. And by the way, just out of curiosity, how is he getting this shot in front of, say, someone like Josh Boatzy? Is it simply because he's fought for a world title before? Because he's not been that active. He's lost to Lyndon Arthur, come back and avenged it. You know, he's fought someone on the weekend. You would have expected him to do what he did. He did it as a tick-over fight whilst he waits to fight Beterbiev, because Anthony I think he thought he was going to fight Beterbiev or someone like that. Bivol he was after, wasn't he, in September of this year. So he's been a little bit inactive. So the tick-over fight is a tick-over fight. But why, and you can educate me here because clearly I don't know, why would he be getting a shot against Beterbiev before Boatzy?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, Frank Warren's sort of put that together. And
just good promoting on his behalf.
I don't know, just good promoters. I'm not sure if he's the mandatory contender for the WBO. That might be a factor.
Might be that.
That I'll have to find that out. I can't remember if it was because he was mandatory and that's why it was. I think actually that might be the reason.
Will it be, in your mind, will it be... I look back and think about Kell Brook going over to America and beating Sean Porter, right? And it was a bit of a surprise to people. Yeah. Was it Sean Porter he beat for the world title?
Yeah, Sean Porter, great.
And everyone was surprised that he went into his backyard and beat them. Now, obviously, Beterbiev's coming to Anthony Yarde's backyard, but notwithstanding that, he's the fighter with all the prestige. He's the title holder. He's the monster in the division. How big a shock would it be if Anthony were to get a result in this fight? To get a win?
Right, so how big a shock would it be? Would it be as big as, say, Lloyd Honeyghan going over and beating Donald Curry?
That's what I was going to. That's what the example I was going to say.
That's a great example,
Yeah.
and you're not far away, Simon. If I'm honest,
It's that big, is it?
You're not far away, mate. It's one of those. He's an overwhelming underdog.
Right.
But I've got this little niggle in my mind that's going, look, but do you know what I'm taking away from it is I think that if we use an opponent that we would both be familiar with, and that's Callum Johnson, and we know what Callum Johnson does, and we know how strong he is, and I hope he enjoys his retirement, by the way. He's just retired recently because of, you know, the struggles since he's lost his father, and, you know, he couldn't put those demons to bed when he was boxing, and it's ended his career, and I feel so sorry for him for that. So, yeah, I hope he has great retirement. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Callum Johnson had Beterbiev on the floor. I mean, before getting stopped in 4 rounds, he was giving Beterbiev all sorts of problems, right? Now, Callum Johnson is physically strong, but he doesn't hit as hard as Anthony Yarde. I can tell you that. And Yarde is one of those guys, he's got a great judgment. Yeah. He's got a great judgment, Yarde. And Beterbiev can be hit. And it doesn't matter how good your jaw is. If you get it and you get it in the right spot, you're going to sleep. And there's something in me that tells me this is not a foregone conclusion, this fight. Of course, you've got to go Beterbiev as a favourite, but
the question is whether Anthony can.
It wouldn't be a big shock to me if he pulled it off. It wouldn't be a huge shock to me if he pulled it off. That's probably a better way of putting it.
Suffice to say, I am, as I said at the top of this little section, I'm a huge admirer of Anthony Yarde. I loved this performance back against Lyndon Arthur, and I really do hope that he goes and does himself justice and slays the beast. Yes. Okay, Spence, that's the 3 subjects that we've been allotted this week. Now we're moving to the section of the show where we get asked questions and we try to provide some version of enlightenment, our version of enlightenment. And the 3 questions we've got this week, the first one is one that's going to irritate me, I think, not from the question, but from the subject matter.
There's a lot of things to irritate you, mate.
Yeah. Well, you do it just by popping up the screen, mate. What do you make of the record pay-per-view price for Fury versus Joshua? I'll tell you what I'll make. I think it's bleeding preposterous. I think it's a pup of a fight. I'd like Derek. I do. I want him to make as much money from boxing as he thinks he can. I understand all that. I understand that once upon a time, in a land long ago, Tyson Fury said he was going to give Derek Chisora a shot after he'd made all the meaningful fights. I like Frank, but I got to call this for what it is. I think it's a Mickey take. I think, Frank told us he'll sell this fight out at a rainy Tottenham Stadium in the middle of December during the World Cup. Not sure about that. And I think that they're going to reap the whirlwind. I think there's an element of financial morality about this. No one in their right mind is going to pay top draw. I don't care how much Tyson thinks he is the bomb. No one's going to pay top money to watch this fight, are they? I
think it's going to backfire massively, if I'm honest, with the price that they've put out. Do you know what they should have done, Simon? He should have stuck it at $19.99. $19.99, and people have gone, you know what? It's a cold winter's night. It's, before Christmas, sit down, watch a bit of boxing. Great. We'll have a look at the little undercard. We'll see Tyson Fury. Watch Derek Chisora giving it a go, because we all sort of know it's a foregone conclusion. But you know that Chisora will bring it and he'll do his best. But just outpricing it is a huge mistake. A huge mistake. When I saw that price, I was like, I think greed's got in the way there somewhere, if I'm totally honest, because I don't know who's advised them to do that price, but I don't think that's a very clever move, if I'm honest, Simon.
I think they're taking the piss, personally.
Yeah.
If you want my honest view, I do. I like Frank. I want all promoters to do well. I want Eddie to do well, irrespective of what he may or may not think about me and the arguments that we've not had, because he won't debate with us properly about Conor Benn. But I want promoters to be good at their jobs. I want them to be effective in their environments, and I want to give the punters end value and make sure that people pay for things in the manner which they're worth. This is not worth top money. Charging top money for this fight adds insult to injury, in my view, because whilst they lit the blue touch paper about Joshua versus Fury, and then they bait and switch and turn it into Fury versus Chisora and expect everyone to pay 27 quid. I hope they reap what they sow.
Listen, where would you price the fight?
50p.
Yeah, but that's because you're tight. I mean, where would you normally price it? Well, I mean, what is the reality?
I can tell you my view on it. I'm pretty sure if I want to go to that fight, I can go. I'm pretty sure if I phone up Frank and say, can I have some ringside tickets? He'll say yes. I'm not even going to bother going because I don't want to watch the fight. I don't think it's a great fight. I don't care who's involved in the fight. I don't care whether Tyson Fury likes me or doesn't like me and agrees with my views on things, and Derek Chisora won't pay me my £100. For me, it's not a fight I want to see. But from the point of view of the punter and the guys that are watching it, I think it's absolutely every day of the week and twice on Sunday. It's a sub £20 price point.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you. I think it's a 1999 fight at best. You know, I'm totally honest. They should have went for volume on that as opposed to pricing.
Well, I don't think you get Spence. I don't think they're going to sell it out, and I don't think they're going to get volume. So they probably figure we'll get 150,000 buys if we're lucky. Maybe 200 tops, so we might as well make a few extra quid out of it because that's what we're going to get, whether we charge £19.99 or whether we charge 27 quid. Either which way, I think it's taking the public for a little bit of a mug. Anyway,
listen, mate. One bit of good news that come out of this: talkSPORT have got that fight, so they can listen to it for free via the app, or just listen to my beautiful dulcet tones on the night.
Yeah. Well, I'll avoid all of it, so I won't even listen to that. Next question, Spence. Jamie asks, how underrated is Vladimir Klitschko?
Yeah, very underrated, if I'm totally honest.
Is he underrated, for a start?
Yeah, I think he was underrated, but do you know what it was with Vladimir Klitschko? I think Corey Saunders knocked him out in 2003, somewhere like that, and he adapted his style. He was a little bit more come forward and a little bit more like Anthony Joshua used to be, really. You can use him as a comparison. He used to go for it, fight a little bit more of his heart on his sleeve. He went over, he boxed Corey Saunders, and Corey Saunders flattened him in a couple of rounds. Yeah, and he adapted his style from then. And that was I think it was 2003, and he adapted his style.
2003.
Was it 2003?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Right, so he adapted his style, and he learned how to control fights.
He got beat again 2 fights later by Lamont Brewster.
Yeah, but that was when he'd done his shoulder or something, didn't he? Or something happened, yeah. But then... Yeah, but he did. But what I'm saying is he changed his style and he made that work to his effects, really. But it became boring.
But it was a strange time in heavyweight boxing. It was a bit like when Larry Holmes took over from Muhammad Ali and that time. And Larry Holmes never ever got the credit that he was entitled to because he was a fabulous fighter, Larry Holmes. And people will only remember that he took over the mantle from Muhammad Ali, and ultimately, at the end of his time, he got knocked out by Mike Tyson. And I think because it was a period of time, post Tyson, post Lennox Lewis, to some extent, with I actually enjoy. I've got to be honest, I actually enjoyed watching Vitaly fight more than I've ever watched Vladimir fighting.
Yeah,
but notwithstanding that, it is a time that I don't think he was underrated. I just don't think it was a particularly inspiring time in the division. And I think us in Britain, those in America, were seeing a lot of these fights in other parts of the world, and it didn't kind of light people up, did it?
No, he went for that was a great comparison, by the way, with the Larry Holmes scenario, because Larry Holmes was probably one of the best heavyweights of all time that never got the recognition because of the Muhammad Ali period, and so that was a great comparison. But yeah, Klitschko, who fought from 1996 to 2017, any fighter that can do that, credit to him. 21 years he was around for, but there was no one around in the division at that time to really captivate,
to light it up. Because I think we'd had this embarrassment of riches with personalities leading up to it, with Holyfield, with Lennox Lewis, with the monster that was Tyson, and all that went round his period of time between 86 and when he eventually became sort of a version of himself. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that perhaps Vladimir Klitschko, in the build-up to Anthony Joshua and all that was built around him fighting Anthony Joshua, I think then he probably got a little bit more of a status amongst fight fans because there was so much engagement with Anthony Joshua. Then his career was built up because people were looking at his achievements up until the point, and more to the point, up to the point he fought Tyson Fury. Fury did what he did. But of course, Anthony Joshua used Klitschko and all that went with it, and we'll talk about something that may well be relational to that in a second. All that went with it put Klitschko in a different light. So I would probably concur with the view that he wasn't just underrated, he probably was slightly undervalued.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. By the way, the better brother was Vitaly.
That's what I say. Yeah,
Vitaly was
and Lennox was lucky to get out of that fight with a victory because he was cut to ribbons, wasn't he, Vitaly Klitschko? But notwithstanding, he was bashing Lennox up, wasn't he?
And he was lucky that he got Vitaly at a very early stage of Vitaly's career.
Yeah.
Vitaly was definitely the better brother of the two.
Okay, final question of the week, Spence. Pete asks, what's your favourite piece of boxing commentary? For him, it's Liftoff for AJ. What's yours?
I like the old commentaries, like when you go back to George Foreman, Joe Frazier, them times when you listen to the commentaries. Do you know what? Because I'm a little bit of a historian with them fights. I used to love watching them, that era of heavyweight boxing. And the first fight that they boxed was in like 1973 or something like that. And Foreman was an unknown quantity then, and he was going in there, and it was the first round. I think Frazier went down 6 times in 2 rounds or something. And he gets knocked down. He goes, let's see what George Foreman's like. And then he hits him, and he goes, Frazier goes down. Yeah. Frazier goes down. Frazier goes down. And it was just brilliant.
It's Howard Cosell going, down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Right? And up against it, down goes Frazier. I am going to go into. I've got 2 that I really like. I like that one, and you've nicked it from me. And I've got to learn my bloody lesson.
You're going to go with that?
I got to learn. I love that one. I was going to go with that. But I made a little list because I think you're a saucy sod, and I'll keep letting you go first, and you keep nicking my one. So I'm going to learn my lessons in future weeks to go first with these answers, get them out quick. But it's 2 that I really like. One because it was such an emotional investment, and one because I thought it was just brilliant commentary throughout the entire fight. The emotional investment was Harry Carpenter going when Frank pinged Mike Tyson, I think in the 2nd or 3rd round, and he just went, "Go on, Frank, get in, Frank," and it was just that complete loss of impartiality.
He lost his work mode. He just then become a fan, didn't he? Become a fan.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's brilliant.
And the second one is more recent, but it was the fight commentary by Adam Smith and by Jim Watt on Frotch Groves. And it was just a story being told by Adam Smith and Jim Watt. Jim Watt was absolutely at his poetic, insightful best. Adam Smith was at his absolute best in terms of describing the fight, and Carl Froch coming into the ring and using expressions like timing perfect, just electrified the environment. This place has been electrified. Talking about throwing right hands, he shouldn't throw anything else, right? Yeah. He can't miss. Right? And just the description, and you're watching this fight, and Jim Watt talking about the way Carl Froch was throwing jabs. He doesn't believe in anything. He doesn't believe in what he's throwing. And you're watching a story being told in front of you, and you're watching a fighter like Jim Watt. I got stuck with him all the bleeding time.
Jesus,
Jim Watt I'd rather talk to than Jim
Lights Out Whyte.
Yeah, Lights Out Whyte, for a variety of reasons. But the point is that Jim Watt was talking you through the fighter mentality. I remember when George Groves came out of a corner, ducked underneath Carl Froch, and he went, "That's downright cheek, class. That's class. That's downright cheek." And I watched it. I thought I was engaged with the commentary, and he talked about there is the impetuosity of youth, the recklessness of youth when George Groves dropped his hands down and wanted to go fight toe to toe with Carl Froch, and it was just brilliant commentary. It was one of the best fights I've seen in this country, you know, in terms of absolute spectacle, because you saw the fight. I don't need to go into
absolutely.
The commentary from Adam Smith and Jim Watt was just absolutely world class. That winds up this episode from the dizzy heights of the desert in Doha and the wonderful region of Hertfordshire that you're in. Listen, anyway, for the viewer.
What was his name? Was it Magnum? Was it Tom Selleck? Was it Tom Selleck?
Yeah.
Tom Selleck.
He didn't ride around. He was in Hawaii, Spence.
Seen you on Twitter. You've even been popping up on Instagram, actually. And it's a Hawaii 5-0, was it, or something?
Who, me?
No, that's what you look like. You're walking around with your shirt and your dark shades on, and you've got them on inside. And I'm like,
fantastic,
come on, Simon, pipe down.
Don't you have some sweeping to do or something in your front lawn or something? Anyway, listen, that's it for episode 7 of Talk Boxing with myself, Simon Jordan, and Spencer Oliver. Of course, importantly, don't forget to keep liking and subscribing. But even more importantly, keep leaving those brilliant questions in the comment section below. And myself and the little fella in Hertfordshire. See you next week.